This is Roy Nicholson. He is the immediate past chairman of the Mississippi Tea Party.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Laura. It is wonderful to see a packed out crowd on one of the coldest days in recent Jackson history, because parents and people are concerned about the education of our children. When the signers of the Declaration of Independence wrote that sacred document, they were not speaking in a historical or philosophical vacuum. They were, in fact, simply expressing in the clearest words to date those sacred principles that culminated from political thinking going all the way back to Plato and the Romans, and all during the Middle Ages, where the ideas of the rights of man and sovereignty and government and the authority of kings and all these sort of things were being debated and discussed. The idea of individual freedom, individual sovereignty, and responsibility started growing and building until our founders declared those sacred words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they went on to say, and to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This was radical, but it was not the first time those words had been said. When our founding fathers said those things, they were standing on the work of intellectual giants, such as British authors of John Locke and Sir Edward Coke and Roger Williams, pardon me. These men penned and fought through all the intellectual and philosophical arguments of the day. And our founding fathers grabbed those and they stood on there and they planted the flag of freedom in our country. Now, who did those great minds, those great thinkers, who did they refer to as their authority for their ideas? Well, it was none other than God. They repeatedly used Holy Scriptures to establish what are the true rights and responsibilities of men and governments. And by the way, they found governments have no rights. They only have responsibilities. Right. It was the Holy Scriptures that informed and instructed them and led to the founding of our country and its Constitution. Now, before someone objects to me bringing God into a political discussion, please consider this. If there is no God, then, and if there's no place in our society or in government for divinity or divine law or Christian scriptures, then none of us have any God-given rights. And if there are no rights, no one has rights. And the only thing that's left is power. And I think we all know the nightmares that get unleashed upon mankind when there's only power. So, considering the above, what was Locke's answer to the question, who is responsible for the education of our children, and who has the authority to decide those things? Is it the state? Is it elite educators? Or is it parents? In his essay, The True End of Civil Government, this is what John Locke wrote. Quote, "The power then that parents have over their children arises from that duty which is incumbent on them to take care of their offspring during the imperfect state of childhood, to inform the mind and govern the actions of their yet children that are ignorant, till reason shall take its place and ease them of that trouble. This is what children want, and the parents are bound to. For God has given man an understanding to direct his actions, and has allowed him a freedom of will and liberty of acting as properly belonging thereunto within the bounds of that law he is under." John Locke further said, "The freedom then of man and liberty of acting according to his own will is grounded on his having reason, which is able to instruct him in the law he is to govern himself by, and make him known how far he is left to the freedom of his own will. To turn him loose," Locke said, "to an unrestrained liberty before he has reason to guide him, is not allowing him the privilege of his nature to be free, but is to thrust him out amongst brutes and abandon him to a state as wretched and as much beneath that of a man as theirs. Now listen carefully to Locke's next words as he continues. This is that which puts the authority into the parents' hands to govern the minority of their children. God hath made it their business to employ this care of their offspring, and has placed in them suitable inclinations of tenderness and concern to temper this power, to apply it as his wisdom designed it, so the children's good as long as they should need to be under it. Then John Locke concluded, the nourishment and education of their children is a charge so incumbent on parents for their children's good that nothing can absolve them from taking care of it. Locke considered those truths as essential and as fundamental to the whole argument of personal freedom and individual sovereignty as all the other arguments that had gone with it. It was an absolute conviction in both John Locke and our founding fathers that there was no just society that was contrary to God's design. Out of that conviction flowed those words, all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that government derives its just power from the consent of the governed. Part and parcel with those fundamental ideas, those foundational stones, is that God-given responsibility of the parents to be in charge and oversee the education of their children. But it seems that among us today in our country there are those who believe that they have some sort of divine right to be in charge of such things, even though there is no rational basis or philosophical reasoning to support those ideas, much less scriptures. To which we tell them, no, not in the United States, and especially not in Mississippi. We are the heirs of the liberty that God handed down and was passed on to us by our founding fathers. We are free people, and with rights and responsibilities, and it is we who are in charge of the education of our children, not them. As a community of free men residing within the state of Mississippi, we have pulled our authority and our resources together and placed them into the hands of our Department of Education, but they remain under our authority, and we have the right to overturn their ideas. It is with our God-given authority as parents that we reject the tenets of Common Core. We reject its agenda, we reject its methods, and we reject its imposition upon us without our knowledge and consent. These are our children. And God has given us the responsibility and the right to control their education. He did not give it to the Department of Education or Common Core or the elites in this country. We therefore call upon the governor, the lieutenant governor, the Speaker of the House and the Senate, as our elected representatives. We're calling upon them to rein in this renegade Department of Education and to make them once